those good old days when people used to travel in Ambassadors, Premium Padmini, Maruti 800? I don't think they were good at all. The truth of the matter is, we live in a globalized world which is constantly changing and we need to adapt to survive. India is a land of contradictions. On the one hand, we have people wasting tons and tons of food, and on the other hand, we have people having no food. To go to a few statistics, nearly 2.5 tons of food is wasted per day in a software company in Bangalore. And I don't even want to speak about the obscene amounts of food that is wasted in weddings, Indian weddings, the great Indian weddings. And on the other hand, we have nearly 47% of the children in India are malnourished, and we rank second in the list, which is pathetic. What is the problem? I think it's a simple case of mismatch between demand and supply. How do we match them? The answer lies in the supply chain, unlocking value in the supply chain. One of the opportunities which you have right now is implementation of FDI in multi-brand retail. With this, we are going to have foreign companies coming into India, bringing state-of-the-art technologies, the best practices in supply chain, and thus we'll be able to remodel the entire supply chain. To give you a flavor of how things work, let me throw in a few jargons. For example, it may be in inventory management, it may be in information communication technology. For example, in business intelligence, data mining, data warehousing, you name it, they have it. Or it can be in sourcing, it can be in procurement. So to sum it all up, they are going to create an efficient value chain by which they are going to deliver value throughout the value chain to all the stakeholders, including the supplier and the consumer. Another important problem that I would want to focus on is the problem of inflation. India is reeling under high levels of inflation, particularly the food inflation and wholesale inflation, which are affecting the common man. The advent of FDI in multi-brand retail will help drive down inflation. How? The synergies derived from the supply chain will help drive costs down and improve operating efficiencies and operating margins throughout the supply chain, which will be shared by all the players. The driven down prices will help drive down the inflation. Thus, inflation can be countered, which has been a perennial bug for India. The RBI and the government have not been able to do anything with the monetary or the fiscal policies for it. A third aspect of it is the problem of unemployment. I mean, it's a global issue right now. But it's been a problem with India for quite a long time, and the rural unemployment is at very high numbers. For example, it's around 10%, just staggering. Various schemes have been initiated by the government, and these are noteworthy schemes, make no mistake about it. The IIML scheme, any other scheme, you name it, they are good. But how about adding a different dimension to it? How about a private sector solution? This is what we are offering to FDI to multi-brand retail. We are going to have lots and lots of jobs being created because of foreign companies coming into India. According to our Commerce Minister, Mr. Anand Sharma, we are going to create 10 million jobs, 10 million in the next 3 years. Don't believe me? Look at the case of Brazil. Walmart has been able to create 7,000 jobs in 2011 alone in Brazil. That should give you some flavor. FDI and multi-brand retail will have ripple effects. It is going to impact other sectors as well, as you would have already guessed by now. So, one such sector is the real estate sector, which I would like to focus on right now. The tier 2 and the tier 3 cities are not seeing much investment activity, and as a result, the real estate sector is not booming there, and to drive it up, we need investment. With the foreign companies coming in, they're going to buy up land there and they're going to set up their shops there, and because of that, we are going to have the real estate sector booming, going up. As per some estimates, in the first year, the growth is expected to be around 10 to 15%, and in the third year, it's expected to be around 35%. These are staggering numbers. 5 times the growth rate of India. I'll take it any day. So, do I need to explain any further? I'd like to end by saying that we can either choose to be the proverbial ostrich with its head buried in the sand, or we can choose to adapt to the situation confronting us and we can improve. So, it's pretty straightforward that we have to go in for FDI and multi-brand retail.
Ever heard of the Walmart effect? It refers to how local businesses and economies suffer when a new Walmart store opens up in that area. For example, wage sales actually dip in that area. This is hardly surprising if you consider what Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart, had to say. I pay low wages. I can take advantage of that. They are going to be successful, but the basis is a very low wage, low benefit model of employment. Not only low wages, there are various other concerns when Walmart opens up. For example, the overall taxes to the state get reduced. The employers have poor health coverage plans. When the country which heralded capitalism to the world is so suspicious of such retail players, we in India should view these players with the same skepticism, if not more. There is a myth in FDI that FDI in multi-brand retail will actually bring Panacea to the farmer suicide problem by bringing them more money through direct procurement and stable demand. A few stats will help dispel that myth. The American farmer today makes 20 cents per dollar of food sold. A decade ago, he was making 40 cents. That's right, he was making twice that 10 years ago. Even as recent as 2009 in Canada, when farm costs shot up by 25% and grocery costs rose by 3%, this increase in costs at the grocery level was not passed on to the farmers. Clearly, the retailers are keeping all the money to themselves. This is hardly surprising if you consider the model under which these retailers operate. Cheap food at high volumes, and the only way to actually sustain this in the long run is to squeeze the farmers. Another lesser known but nevertheless crucial downside to FDI is that of food biodiversity. Large retailers in the West have hastened the development of genetically modified food. And what do? They market the most popular genetically modified foods heavily. As a result, the farmer, due to market pressures, starts producing only this narrow selection of crops, and the consumer has no choice but to consume the same narrow selection. As proof of this phenomenon, consider the fact that profits of seed companies which promote this very same GM food had the profits shoot up by 44% in 2007. Lastly, FDI in multi-brand retail is not just bad for India, it is bad for the world. How, you ask? Well, consider this. Large format retailers transport their food over long miles. This means transportation and hence pollution. Not only that, they in fact employ a lot of technologies such as storage, etc., which are very resource hungry. As a result, they lead to global warming. How bad is the problem? A recent study shows that the greenhouse gases emitted by just 3 of the retailers, Walmart, Carrefour and Tesco, put together was 20 million metric tons. If these 3 were to form a country together, they will be the 80th most polluting country in the world. Think of the impact of global warming. It affects our monsoons. And what is the impact of monsoons? A poor monsoon? The agricultural output of the country goes down. As a result, the very problem that we are looking to solve, easy food availability, is actually exacerbated by these very multi-brand retails. To conclude, India is a complex country. We have our own set of dynamics. And we should not be looking to ape the best in everything they do. Living in a globalized world by no means we should be looking for global solutions for anything and everything we do.
Okay, now that my friend Mahesh has put forth this argument, I would like to pick up a particular point in this argument which says that organized retail will crowd out small retailers. I have my own doubts about this. Why? Firstly, because domestic multi-brand retailers have coexisted with the kirana stores and the unorganized sector for a long time, and nearly 93% of the entire retail sector is made up of unorganized sector. And if domestic multi-brand retailers are not affecting the kirana stores in a big way, I doubt how much of a major impact these foreign multi-brand retailers will have. Secondly, I'd like to draw a parallel between the other countries and India. So consider the developed countries for us, Europe and Japan. Multi-brand retail outlets and the small kirana stores have coexisted peacefully, and the small kirana stores have in fact flourished for quite a long time. So I don't see them to be a problem in the developed world. Well, you might say that there might be a problem in the developing world. The dynamics might be different. Let's pick some countries there as well. China, for example. The number of stores, the kirana stores, the smaller stores have increased in number and have not decreased in number. They have increased from 1.9 million stores to 2.5 million stores from 1992 when the FDI, when the retail sector was opened up and FDI was allowed in China. To quote a few other developing countries like Brazil and Indonesia, let us consider that the total offtake in groceries, fruits, vegetables, etc. is 100%. Of these, nearly 50 to 70% of the total offtake is from smaller stores. This is not a small number. This is a huge number. In fact, I can say that these smaller stores are dominating the bigger stores. So what's the problem? I don't see a problem at all. I do accept the fact that some amount of crowding out is bound to happen because these foreign players come in and because there is competition and the prices go down and these players are not able to compete. But that's due to competition. The major reason for this to happen, the crowding out that is because of the inefficiencies in the existing supply chain which has been established by the government and the incumbent domestic multi-brand outlets. And the foreign multi-brand outlets will come in and do away with these inefficiencies, as I have already pointed out in my original argument as to how the supply chain is going to be improved. They are going to unlock significant value and they are going to deliver significant value to all the stakeholders. Thus, I believe foreign FDI in multi-brand, FDI in retail has to be allowed so as to create significant value. Go.
I would like to take you for the last point where you said multi-brand retails are actually good for supply chains. A UK Competition Commission study done in 2000 of 3 major retail chains, Marks and Spencer, Sainsbury and Tesco, found that they had a poor record of treatment of all their suppliers. In fact, they passed a huge burden of their costs disproportionately to the small farmers. This, if you think about it, in fact corroborates the earlier point where I said that American farmers are actually making less today than they were a decade ago. Now let us look at the employment myth where you said that FTA in multi-brand retail will actually increase employment. Let us look at Walmart in Mexico. Walmart entered Mexico in 1991 and within 2 decades had a 50% market share in the retail sector. They have more than 2,700 stores, nearly 4 times their closest competitor, and they employ 200,000 Mexicans. All hunky-dory. What's wrong, you ask? Well, there are 2 things. First, look at the ease with which Walmart pushed aside the local Mexican retail players. This is what is actually causing us to think twice before they enter the Indian space and attack the Indian retailers the same way. Secondly, to gain 50% market share in the retail sector, Walmart employs 200,000 Mexicans. Do you have any idea how much the Indian retail sector employs? 40 million people. That's right, 40 million. And with Walmart or any big retail players' inherent focus on costs and automation, there is no way that they'll actually drive down unemployment. They'll actually increase it. Let us now look at what will happen when a few big retail players actually enter India. Macroeconomics tells us that this will lead to an oligopoly or a monopoly. And what does this mean? Essential commodities such as food will be tied up in the hands of few big MNCs. And they'll be powerful. And no one can stop them if they want to say tomorrow, cut down jobs to increase their profit margins. Secondly, it is not just the retail sector that gets affected. Global retail players will have a global outlook when it comes to sourcing, and they will not just look at India for sourcing their raw materials. As a result, the Indian manufacturing sector will also take a hit.
Reacting to your argument regarding sourcing and procurement by the multi-brand retail outlets, there is a particular clause in the FDI policy set up by the Indian government which says that the sourcing has to have 30% local component, which means out of the total produce taken up by these outlets, 30% has to come from the domestic market. This, I believe, is a strong driver which will form a multiplication factor for either employment generation, or it may be technology dissemination, or it may be income generation, and it's a far better methodology to generate income than some of the fiscal policies being adopted by the government. To give you an example, for example, consider Indonesia, which is a developing economy. Since the emergence of a multi-brand retail outlet, we have had 90% of all fresh food and 70% of all food material being sourced from local players. What does this suggest? It means that they are flourishing. Take Thailand, for example. The agro-based food processing industry is flourishing after the introduction of the multi-brand retail outlets. And then now consider China, for example. China is our closest neighbor and we have to consider them, right? So China has been registering impressive growth year on year after the introduction of the 100% FDI policy in retail and wholesale sectors. So all these point to the fact that the introduction of the multi-brand retail outlets has contributed to significant value to all these stakeholders.
I take issue with the comparison with the Chinese economy. The Chinese economy is a manufacturing-based economy. In fact, they are one of the biggest suppliers to all the international retailers all around the world. The Indian economy does not compare to it. Thus, comparison between these two is not fair. In fact, the Indian economy will stand to lose in both the manufacturing and the service sector. Let us now move to the agricultural economy. It is a highly fragmented one, and the 80-20 principle applies here. Small number of farmers own large tracts of land, and large number of farmers own very small tracts of lands. And what do you think will happen when these big retailers enter India through FDI? They will approach only the large farmers due to economies of scale. The small farmers will be shut out of the market, and they will eventually be pushed to fringes of unemployment. Since you mentioned supply chain earlier, let us now move to the most important part of the supply chain, the end, the consumers. Like I said earlier, once you have multi-brand players in India, it will lead to situations of oligopoly and monopoly. And what does this mean? Collusion. And what does that result in? Increased prices. The sharing of synergies of the supply chain about which you waxed eloquent will not happen, as there is no need to in this case. Not only that, the increased prices will actually push up inflation and not push down inflation like you had mentioned in your opening argument.
Picking on your competition point, I believe that the foreign players are going to enter the Indian market in a bunch and not as a single player. And generally, from theory of competition, when people enter in bunches, they generally tend to compete on price. Retail in sector to sector, people compete on price. And hence, I believe that there will be perfect competition. With perfect competition, the prices are going to be driven lower and consumers are obviously going to benefit because of it, which will drive down food inflation and headline inflation, thus bringing the inflation of the country down. This was the argument which I presented in my opening argument. Now, I would like to, on an ending note, I would like to focus on one particular point which you mentioned in your opening argument. This is related to the displacing of the intermediaries. Yes, these intermediaries are going to be displaced because of the presence of these foreign multi-brand outlets. But there is a view which is running which says that these people are benefiting because of the APMC Act, the Agricultural Produce Marketing Act. These people who are displaced will be able to find jobs in other food processing based industry because of their experience in the agriculture sector. And hence, I believe because of the effective job relocation, we will be able to add significant value across the supply chain and to all these stakeholders.